Coming up on this week's show, Richard Compson Sater talks about moustaches, nicknames, and the privileges of rank. Plus, we'll unveil a new giveaway for Valentine's Day.
Welcome to the Big Gay Fiction Podcast, the show for readers and writers of gay romance fiction. If you can read it, write it, watch it, or listen to it, these two guys are going to talk about it. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Adams and Will Knaus.
Welcome to episode number 66 of Jeff and Will's Big Gay Fiction Podcast. I'm Jeff from JeffAdamsWrites.com.
And I'm Will from WillKnaus.com. Welcome, sir, to yet another fine, informative episode of the podcast.
Why, thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
We're silly today, by the way. Just in case you were curious. First week of the new year is gone. Woohoo!
Meh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still gone.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. I've managed to live up to this year's goal of writing every day.
How so?
Well, we're 8 days into the year.
Well, yes, we are.
As we record on January 8th. And I've done about an average of 1,800 words per day. Which has racked up another 14,000 words for Codename Winger Book 2. Which I'm very happy about.
Well, yay for that project. That's good to hear.
It's the way that if I can keep moving, and of course I'm in LA next week, so that could slow me down a little bit, especially with the travel days. Maybe. We'll see. It should be done within the next 2 weeks, the first draft. So, kind of excited about that. I've actually started plotting the short story that I need to write for the charity anthology. In the afternoons while I'm not writing Winger, because Winger gets written in the morning, so I've been plotting in the afternoons so I can just kind of dive into that first draft while I let Winger kind of marinate a little bit before I start its editing process.
Busy little bee.
Yes, that's the goal for the year, is to be a busy bee. Love's Opening Night also finished up its blog tour. It had its last stop yesterday on Saturday the 7th over at Joyfully Jay. Thanks, Jay, for hosting me. And thanks to everybody else who hosted me, too. I was on 7 or 8 blogs, I think it was. Gave away some copies, and so far the reaction to the book has been good. I've been happy. So thanks everybody who's read it. Thanks everybody who's taken time to leave a review on Amazon or Goodreads or somewhere else. It's been a really good release so far.
Cool. Very glad to hear it.
Yes.
Congrats, sir.
Hopefully it's the first of many good things for the year.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed.
So as we talked about last week, we've been working with Patreon as a way for our listeners to help support production of the show.
Now, your pledges help offset the cost of producing the show each month. And for fans who pledge at the silver and gold levels, you'll have the exclusive opportunity to ask questions of our upcoming guests.
Yes, that's very true. We've already had a couple people jump on that to ask Jordan L. Hawk some questions, because I actually get to interview her this coming week for an episode you'll hear later this month. We need to give a thank you to our new patrons. A very big thank you to Amy, Anne, Eileen, Ellen, and Laura. We thank you very much for joining us to help support the podcast.
Yes, we're very grateful and glad that you can join us in supporting the podcast and making sure it remains free and available for many, many years to come.
Yes. And we should note that for any month we hit our extended pledge goal, we will do a special bonus episode for all of our patrons. And we are just under halfway towards that goal to the first bonus episode.
Yeah. We don't know exactly what we're going to do for this super special, awesome bonus episode, but we got a few. Well, we got till the end of the month. If it happens, we'll figure it out.
Yeah,
we're good at Well, we're sort of good at figuring stuff.
We'll sort it out and make it good and bonusy.
It'll be so awesome you can't stand it.
So if you want to know how to become a patron or get more information on our Patreon, you can go to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/biggayfictionpodcast for more details.
There may be a chill in the air, but romance is always in bloom.
Announcing the Big Gay Fiction Podcast Valentine's Day Gay Romance Paperback Giveaway.
We're giving you a chance to win a prize package filled with enchanting contemporary gay romances. And who knows, you may discover your next book boyfriend.
The prize pack includes an autographed paperback of Home the Hard Way by Z.A. Maxfield, an autographed copy of Unbreak My Heart by Kaylee Klein, plus paperbacks of Eyes Only for You by Andrew Gray and Unstable Stud by Ariel Tachna.
To enter, go to the show notes page for this episode at biggayfictionpodcast.com or visit the official giveaway page at biggayfictionpodcast.com/Valentine.
Remember, you can't win if you don't enter, so visit biggayfictionpodcast.com/Valentine before the rafflecopter ends on February 5th.
Now, it's worth noting that one of the books in this giveaway that we're running right now is by Zam, Z.A. Maxfield, and we have it on very good authority. In fact, we heard it from Zam herself that Home the Hard Way is her favorite book.
Yes.
Of all the books that she's written, Home the Hard Way is her favorite. So if you would like your chance to win this particular author's favorite book...
Autographed, no less.
Oh, yeah, totally. It's like... that's extra super awesome.
That's right.
Be sure to go to the link in the show notes or to the very special giveaway page, biggayfictionpodcast.com/Valentine.
Yeah.
So, speaking of Valentines and love, we went on a date.
Yesterday afternoon. Yes, we did. We finally got to see La La Land up here in our tiny little neck of the woods of Northern California. It only just showed up yesterday.
Yes.
Well, Friday, but yeah. I loved it. It kind of met and I think exceeded every expectation I had for it.
Now, before you go on being effusive about the film...
And gushy?
Yes, please explain to our listeners what the heck La La Land is.
So, for those of you who don't know, La La Land stars Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone.
Okay, just stop. That's all they need to know.
Well, yeah, probably, right? And it is what I would consider to be basically a love letter to old school Hollywood musicals and love stories. These two meet by accident on a freeway initially, and then run into each other again in a jazz club as Ryan Gosling is being fired. And from there, it's a little, I hate you kind of back and forth that grows into see if I can... You're going to correct me, I know, when I'm done going through this.
Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Let's see how good you do.
Evolves over time into, checking out each other's career goals. She wants to be an actress. He wants to own a jazz club. And it progresses in a very lovely way from there. She learns to like jazz, actual jazz, not Kenny G jazz, as she likes to calls it at one point. He comes to understand her desire to be an actress and the kind of actress and screenwriter she wants to be. And it goes over the course of just over a year. It starts in winter and ends in winter. Mm-hmm. And then has a 5-year jump at the end to kind of see where everything's sorted out. And there's a lot of music in it. There's a lot of... It's very old Hollywood musical in that they just break out and sing. The singing doesn't necessarily connect to the plot in any way. Well, it does move the plot, but it's not because it's, I'm now losing it here.
Yeah, you're going off into the weeds. What the the point is, it's sort of I thought it was a very simple, straightforward love story, no frills. It's the love story sort of reminded me of what's the Ethan Hawke, Julie Delpy?
The Sunrise movies, the Sunrise Sunset.
Yeah, after sunrise, before
sunrise,
after sun. Oh, I don't know.
That trilogy.
You know what I'm talking about.
The Richard Linklater.
Yes.
Ethan Hawke, Julie Delpy movies.
Yes,
yeah.
I thought the love story reminded me of those sort of postmodern indie kind of takes on love, while at the same time exploring their relationship in all of its Technicolor musical glory. Mm-hmm. The songs are by Pasek and Paul.
The lyrics are Pasek and Paul, who are represented on Broadway right now by Dear Evan Hansen, and also wrote Dogfight a few years back off Broadway, which we really enjoyed.
That's a terrific show.
Yes. So it's possible they're going to be up for Oscars and Tonys this year.
They should be. Yeah.
And the music is very lush. The dance sequences, which are choreographed by Mandy Moore, who's a favorite from So You Think You Could Dance, are just gorgeous. And some of them none of them take place in a reality that we actually live in, but the one that I liked the best, I thought, was the one in the Griffith Park Observatory, where they just kind of went off and danced in the stars, because that was just really gorgeous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The movie has certainly drawn, it's kind of a love and hate club. Without going into spoilers, the ending is bothering people to a large degree. We like the ending.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like the ending a lot. I think it is perfectly appropriate, and it wraps up the story of these two characters perfectly.
Mm-hmm. But in fact, using the analogy of the sunrise sunset movies that you just did, you could also see potentially where they could do a 5-year or 10-year jump and see, and have some kind of sequel with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
So, yeah, thumbs up from the both of us. We really, really liked it.
Yeah. Word is there's an IMAX release coming. I saw on the movie's official page, and I think it would be very cool to see that kind of film in IMAX, where usually you're only seeing
That would be interesting.
the big shoot-em-ups and, like Star Wars and Avengers and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, if anybody out there happens to catch the IMAX release, we'd love to hear what that's like.
Cool.
Meanwhile, I just look forward to the Blu-ray.
Yes. Yes, that'll be nice.
So we got a comic book this week too.
Just, I believe last week, DC Comics released their anthology, Love is Love. This is the charity anthology that they did to help the survivors of the Orlando Pulse shooting. This is a remarkable, wonderful book. It constitutes many different artists and writers from all different corners of the creative community, not just comic books, and each of them is basically given a page or two, and they can tell whatever story they want in connection to the Pulse shooting itself. The book itself seems to be sort of loosely what's the word, collected into stories that deal directly with the tragedy itself, and then towards the back it's more representational about the themes of love and family, and how people were brought together in the aftermath of the tragedy. Some of the things that I like the best, Kevin Keller from Archie Comics is featured in the book, as well as this really lovely page of the Harry Potter characters. I think a couple of months ago there was they released a preview image of this piece of art, and it was a big deal because J.K. Rowling and Warner Brothers released the character licenses for this particular special anthology. So that's really nice. Lots of really wonderful, poignant, emotional, funny, sweet, romantic, lots of terrific stuff in this book. I haven't sat down and read it, cover to cover just yet. I have flipped through and read some of them. It's an emotional experience, but a rewarding one is what I would say as a whole. Yeah, your thoughts?
I've read a few. I sat down and paged through. I at least looked at everything. It is quite emotional. It's hard not to get emotional reading it.
Yeah, definitely.
Kevin Keller is actually in there twice. He's in there. The page that Will showed, if you're on the video feed, is more of his more current life with Kevin books. But there's also one where he's with the Riverdale gang more back in high school, and taking a look at it from that perspective, which was quite poignant. They got a couple pages for that. There's one in the upfront part of the book, which is Batman actually at the club in the aftermath, which is extremely moving. So yeah, we will have it in the show notes. You can get it on paperback from Amazon. Although as we record this, it is now back ordered. They've apparently run out of their first shipment, but it's also available ebook for Kindle and for the Comixology app. So we'll link to that in the show notes from there. Now, you've also, well, you mentioned that, you're pointing at the script. The proceeds, as Will mentioned, goes to Equality Florida as part of the fund that they'll distribute specifically for victims, survivors, and families of the Pulse shooting.
Yeah, yeah. So, Love is Love, check it out. I think it's a really great book.
Yes, absolutely.
Well worth getting.
Now, you also have discovered a new comic, AJ and Magnus.
Yeah, so in one of those just weird things where you're just, flipping through the internet, wasting time, I stumbled across this. Well, I did. Anyway, I don't know how or why I discovered this super duper adorable comic called AJ and Magnus. And essentially, it's the story of a little boy and his giant mastiff dog, and their adventures, along with his two dads and their wacky extended family. It's the most adorable thing ever. I love the few strips that I have seen so far. I'm following them on social media. And they've also released two collections so far. Volume 2 came out, I believe, just before Christmas. It's called AJ and Magnus, and it's by Brian and Simon Steele, a couple who draws on their own experience from their family and their extended family and put it into the work. So I highly recommend it. I think it's super funny, super cute. AJ and Magnus, check it out.
Awesome. So, moving away from comics and back into real life.
Real life,
yeah. I had the opportunity recently to sit down with Richard Compson Sater.
Talk
to him.
Oh, this isn't boring at all. This is good.
Well, no, it's not boring. Why would we don't do boring on this show?
Well, you were like real life, and I'm like, oh, this is good real life.
It's good real life. Silly man. I got to sit down with Richard Compson Sater a couple weeks ago and talk to him about his debut novel, Rank. Now, we've talked about Rank a couple times on the show because we first discovered it back when we were at Gay Romance Northwest in September of last year, and we heard him read from it. And it actually ended up in my top 5 of the books that I read last year because it's really good, and you still need to read it.
Yes.
But I got the opportunity to sit down and talk to him, and so here is that interview. I'm happy to welcome Richard Compson Sater to the podcast. Richard received a master's degree in creative writing from Purdue University in 1989, the same year he took an Air Force commission. He spent most of his military career as a photojournalist and public affairs officer under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell directive that kept gay service members in the closet. He retired after 24 years of active duty in reserve service, having attained the rank of lieutenant colonel, along with a number of accolades in the process. During preparation for his deployment to Afghanistan in 2003, he started working on a short story about a young Air Force lieutenant who falls inconveniently in love with his boss, a brigadier general. That story grew to 400-plus pages, and a dozen years later, under the title of Rank, it became his first novel, which was released this past November. Richard, welcome so much to the show.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm pleased to be here.
I fell in love with Rank hearing you read at Gay Romance Northwest back in September. The chapter you read where Harris and the, general at this point was, and they were at this dance that the general had to attend, and eventually he dances with Harris as part of that. It just really blew me away. How well that scene was set. And then I was surprised when I read the book that it's actually a good ways into the book at that. And it wasn't like one of the first chapters. And for the audience, if you haven't caught my review of Rank, they could go back to episode 61 for that, where I kind of had my raving moment about it. So tell us about Rank, beyond the simple logline of Air Force Lieutenant falls for his boss, a general.
I had the idea of writing a story like this in 2003, and as you mentioned, I really hadn't thought about writing a novel for the longest time. I really felt that my forte was the short story, and I wondered if I would be able to sustain a narrative over the course of a novel, and I never really had seriously attempted it. But I started writing Rank, and I had a free weekend, and I had an idea of a story about a lieutenant who falls in love with a general. And for a variety of reasons, that's not something that a lieutenant would choose to do, and not something a general would choose for a number of reasons. And the more I wrote, the more I thought of to write, and within the space a weekend, I had, I think, almost 50 pages that I wrote. I just concentrated time and nothing else to do, and the inspiration, and so I started writing. And while I was deployed to Afghanistan, I worked long days. I was assigned to the Army at that time, even though I'm Air Force, and I needed something to do at the end of the day. We were working 12 to 14 hours a day, every day, and I'd get back to my room about 8 or 9 at night, and I needed something to kind of decompress a little bit. And I found that working on my novel in its sort of fictitious world and characters that I liked gave me the break that I needed, and I would make sure that I had a little bit of time every night to write and get lost in that other world. And at the end of my deployment, I kept writing, and the manuscript ended up to be well over 400 pages, and it was a little bit unwieldy. And over time, once I felt that I had told the whole story, then I started to edit it, and that took quite a few years as well. Just because I had gotten into the habit of, I hadn't written it in chronological order. I would write for a while, and if I got stuck on something, rather than try and figure my way through it, I would just start writing someplace else. And I had the general frame of the story in mind, and certain incidents like the dance, for example, or the kite flying scene, or Harris taking the general home to meet his mother and father, Harris and the general having an argument after visiting a gay bar. I had these different scenes in mind, and so I could just go to one of them and write one of those scenes, and then I had to sort of piece them together in a logical order and put in the continuity for them as well. And when I first wrote the novel, of course, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was in full effect, in full flower, and was still kind of the kiss of death in the military to be gay, openly gay. You couldn't. And a number of people ended their careers when they either chose to tell or were outed. And so the first draft of Rank was a very different novel, because it was about a closeted lieutenant who fell in love with a general who was also deeply closeted. And at the end of the novel, they were still in the closet because they had to be. And then when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed in 2011, all of a sudden I had a book on my hands that was no longer particularly relevant, except maybe as a historical document. And that's probably the last thing you want for a new novel, is to be last year. And so I really kind of had to start from scratch and rethink the whole storyline. What if Harris is openly gay right from the beginning, and proud to be out, proud to be serving as an out airman in the Air Force? And what if he fell in love with the general and then found out that the general too was gay, but that the general was unwilling to come out? So that became the new story.
Were there other things that changed just with time passing from your first draft as a dozen years passed that you decided to change beyond the DADT repeal?
Yes, there were actually. And with the new version of Rank, I had to, or it gave me the opportunity, I should say, to create some new characters. I created the character of Mark Sinclair, who was a fellow gay airman, retired at the time when Harris meets him. He's a budget officer for the unit that Harris belongs to. And I put him in, I kind of created him and his partner as mentors for Harris to kind of run interference in a way for Mark to try to show Harris the good sense of having situational awareness about that there's, of course, you don't have to be in the closet, but sometimes you need to be judicious about pointing out to everyone that you are gay, because it's not always the most relevant thing for the job that you're doing. And so I had the opportunity to create some new characters and then put scenes throughout the novel where those characters are important. I also found during the writing and editing process that there were some things I had to let go of, some scenes that just seemed, working with my editor, that seemed maybe that my editor thought were extraneous. It just made the novel a little too long without really adding anything in particular to the momentum. And for a writer, it's hard to do. Mm-hmm. I slaved hard over that chapter. I don't want to delete it, but my editor, Jerry Wheeler, was wonderful to work with and very patient, and I trusted him implicitly, and he had good instincts, and I really believe that working with him made Rank a stronger book. The one part of the story that I regretted most cutting was that there was not a subplot, but a flashback of Harris's first long-term relationship, which had occurred when he was in college with an older professor. And I felt that was important to show that Harris, the fact that Harris fell for a general who was quite a bit older than he was not something out of the ordinary for Harris, that from the time he was younger that he most appreciated older men as partners. And I thought that was important. But others suggested that flashback kind of slowed down the momentum of the story, and so regretfully that had to go. So it's mentioned a time or two that Harris had a relationship with a professor, but not in any detail.
Do you think you found your voice for the longer narrative now? Because to me, reading this as a debut novel, and then knowing that you weren't sure you could sustain the narrative because you'd been writing short stories and your degrees are really in short stories. Do you think you finally found it? Because I kind of think you did. And, is that something you're going to be able to just carry forward now into future work?
I think I did. I was very confident by the time I finished Rank. I was satisfied with it, and I felt, this is a good story. And I liked the freedom and the flexibility that I found to write a long story and stretch it out and see where it goes and where can I take these characters. And I have two other novels that one's almost done. One is about maybe about 3/4 of the way done, and the other one I've outlined for yet a fourth. So I don't think I'll have any trouble sustaining the longer narrative with future works. I enjoy the long format. I love the short story as well, but the long format is fun.
And you certainly give the characters a lot to deal with in the long format. There's the generals in the closet, which we mentioned. There's a May-December romance in play here, which certainly Harris's parents seem to take a little exception to. And then there's the military regulations that are still in play, with the lieutenant and the general not really supposed to be coming together because of their rank differential. Was there concern about putting all these balls kind of into play in one story?
I think for the characters, for the lieutenant and the general, I didn't really have any choice but to bring in all those aspects of the story, because I think if I didn't, that readers would have wondered why not. And their lives are complicated and messy, but I think life is complicated and messy. And as a gay airman myself, I was very cautious about pursuing relationships, certainly with with other people in the military, because there's always the threat of being discovered, and the fear that you can't be totally honest with other people until you know them well enough to be open with them, and they have the same fears, and so it makes it difficult to trust if you're concerned about your career, and so it was a challenge for me, because I'm a lot more inclined to want to come out and be out than to stay in the closet. And so I don't know that the military was the best fit for me, but I kind of made it fit and did well while I was in there. But I suspect, without being able to prove it, that there probably were people who suspected that I was gay, and that in certain instances, promotion boards and other considerations that I may have paid the price for that. But again, I don't have any proof of that, just a suspicion. But I guess to wind my way back to your question, I think all of the different aspects, Harris had to have a family. He had to have friends. He had to have, as a lieutenant in the Air Force, he's a junior officer. You have a lot of pressure as a junior officer. Regulations are constantly being sort of thrown at you as if you're too ignorant to know, but here, let me school you. You need to be able to do this, and you have to do that, and you have to do it this way. You can't do it that way, and this is the tradition, and you can't buck that tradition. And the general has his own set of rules that he's working with as well, and his own family, and it all needed to go into the pot, I think.
There's a great scene while they're visiting Harris's parents, where the parents, kind of drill on the general a little bit. Well, can you do this? Can you do that? Do you know how to do this? Do you know how to book a flight? Kind of things like, I have people to do that for me.
Yeah. And I think the higher the rank you go. I mean, I remember as a new lieutenant, the kind of jobs that I was given were pretty basic, and I was fortunate that I had 3 years enlisted time before I was commissioned, so I had already had some inkling about the service. I wasn't a brand new lieutenant, just fresh off the street. And so I already had 3 years of military experience and some idea of what I was in for. And as does Harris. Harris was prior enlisted when he is commissioned. And so he has practical experience. The general was never prior enlisted. He went to the Air Force Academy and was commissioned right from the academy as a pilot, which again in the Air Force is one step below being a god. And so here he's not only a general, but he's also a pilot and a commander. So he's sort of got the triple threat. And Harris has kind of come up from the bottom, and he's had to learn how to kind of scratch his way through and do things on his own. He's held jobs that have outside the military. He's gone to school and worked for a living and owned his own home and had to do things like unclog a toilet and change an air filter in his car, because it would never have occurred to him that he could pay somebody else to do those things when he could do them himself. But the general, I think by virtue of his position and the way he achieved it, he didn't have the time to be bothered with those things. He had more important things to do as an officer and as a commander and as a pilot. And if he could farm out some of that other stuff and not worry about it himself, then he did. And it's just a different track that he followed. And so Harris has practical experience in life that the general, in spite of his age and his rank, the general doesn't have a lot of that same practical experience.
One of the truly endearing parts of the book are the nicknames. The general, initially the nicknames aren't great for Harris because he's in trouble, or it would seem that he's in trouble with the general. but then they become terms of endearment as well, kind of down the line. And you were on the Hopeless Romantics podcast and mentioned that you'd even gone so far as to make sure that he never used the same one twice, which I thought was pretty awesome. How did you develop that as like a thing for the book, that the general was going to just dole out all these nicknames? And do you know a count of how many that there are for him in the book?
I don't know how many there are. I never stopped to count. But I do remember when I was proofreading the book, using the search and find feature on my word processing program to make sure that I hadn't repeated myself. Because did I use foxtrot someplace else? I better check. And so any that sounded like maybe I had used them before, I checked to make sure that I had not. As to how I came up with that as a character trait for the general, I don't remember. I think it just seemed to me something that would be quirky and something that someone, again, with his rank, he could get away with it. And it's kind of thing that he'd be doing. And as Harris, until he figured out what the general was doing, and that when he would holler for lawn chair or sawhorse or something like that, that he was summoning Harris. Until Harris figured that out, he got into trouble a few times for not answering when he was called. And I can't really remember how it came to me to do that. I never knew anyone who did that myself. I never knew a person who used that as a gimmick or anything like that. But it just seemed to suit the character of the general that he would do something like that.
Yeah, it painted him so perfect to me. And it just kept going, and it added nuances to him as he came up with the new nicknames, both to use in the office and to use when they were just together.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Harris, and I'm not going to give away what it is, ultimately settles on one nickname for the general. Mm-hmm. Was it hard to find that one nickname? Because to me, it was just, in the book, it's such a perfect moment when he finally gives the general his nickname, and it's the only one he ever used for him.
I have a friend of mine who is now deceased. He died of cancer, who called me Traveler, and it was just something between us. And my recollection, because it was a long time ago that he started to do it, was that he was impressed with all the places where I had traveled, and that it was just, I think he was looking for kind of something endearing and settled on that, and I liked it, and I knew it was just something that he and I shared, and it just seemed ideal to borrow that for the general. Traveler is also the name of Robert E. Lee's horse, Lee, the Civil War general, and it's a great word, and it's a long word. It's at 3 syllables, and it's like traveling when you say it. To me, it's you can't say it quickly. You've got to take the time to say all 3 syllables, and it makes you slow down a little bit, and I liked that.
Yeah, as opposed to what I believe you said were all 2-syllable nicknames.
For the most part, the general's nicknames for Harris are 2 syllables, usually with a hard consonant, something that could be announced with a certain amount of force and I don't know, foxtrot or is a good nickname, but pineapple is not. For example, there's just certain words that you can say yes, that would work, would not, and it's just, I don't know, they had to be words, even though they aren't gender specific words. They had to be things to me that sounded like they would be masculine.
The general's mustache is also kind of a character in this book, in the intimate scenes. Was that always there from the beginning, or did that just kind of work its way in over time because it's such a distinct physical trait that is especially a trigger for Harris as part of his attraction?
It was there right from the beginning. When I first envisioned the story, I had one person in mind that I thought if I could ever make Rank into a movie, that Sam Elliott would be the general. And so my sort of when I'm imagining, or when I was writing and picturing the scenes in my head as I was writing them, it was always Sam Elliott was always General O'Neill, and of course Sam Elliott's mustache and his deep voice. I kind of co-opted those for the general, and the dark hair and the build and everything. Quite that sort of image. I have had a mustache myself from almost my entire military career. Almost as soon as I was commissioned, I grew a mustache and kept it. But it was, especially as a junior officer, it was a struggle sometimes, because the Air Force and the rest of the military is very particular about what it considers an appropriate sized mustache. And there is a regulation that spells out how it can be shaped and how much of your lip can be covered, and the angle that the sides are supposed to be, and whatnot. And they really would prefer that you not have one at all. But I would be taken aside and told that I needed to trim my mustache in accordance with regulations. And so right from the start, that was one thing I thought. One of the first things that a general might do is sort of assert his authority by flaunting the regulation about the size of a mustache, and to the point that it makes other people a little bit uncomfortable. And at one point in rank, even the general's boss, who's a 4-star general, tells him, "When are you going to get that renegade mustache under control? You look like a bandit." But it's not an order for him to take the scissors into the bathroom right now and trim that thing. And it just becomes something that the general's known for. And in the world of the novel, I made it something that his peers are willing to accept, that it's one thing about him that is one of his quirks.
To your knowledge,
but I love your notion that it's almost a character.
It is so often.
That's a great notion.
Since because so often, Harris remarks that he notices what the general's mustache is doing is like the forewarning of what's to come, good or bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but
I was going to ask you. You hinted at things that were 3/4 done and one being outlined. Do you have a timeline for what's next, and can you give us a sneak peek on what those might entail?
The one that's closest to being finished is called Thirst, and it is a novel about a bartender who falls in love with an alcoholic, and the alcoholic is a military veteran, but he was thrown out of the military for drinking. So there really isn't, there's that military connection, but the story takes place quite a while after his military service, and it's mentioned a few times, but it doesn't really figure prominently in the story. That's the closest to being done. I'm probably about, I'm guessing about 80 to 90% complete on that one. And then another one that I'm working on called Scratch is another military story, and it's about two Air Force, an officer and an enlisted man who begin a relationship, and that's, I'm having fun working on it, but it seems a little light after Rank. It seems like it's a little more maybe not quite so much at stake. But it's still fun to work on, and I don't know, as I have the time, it's not finished yet, so it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Okay, cool.
I'm
Definitely
also
look forward for those.
well, thank you. I'm enrolled at the University of Washington as a student right now for the first time in quite a while in the screenwriting program, and that's something that I've been a movie buff for most of my life, and I thought, I think Rank would make a great movie.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't know the first thing about writing a movie script, but there's no better way to learn than to go to school, and sort of the pressure of completing assignments and going to class every week, and our instructor promises that if we faithfully carry out our duties as a student, that we will have a completed film script by the end of next semester. So I'm working on that, and who knows? That might. I'm enjoying it tremendously, and that might turn out to be another career. Who knows?
Hey, and maybe Rank turns into a movie. That would be pretty cool. What is the best way for people to keep up with you online so they can find out what comes next?
I have a website, which is richardcompsonsater.com, and that I update that regularly. I have an author page on Facebook. If anyone with a Facebook account can search, it's a public website, so you don't need to ask me to be a Facebook friend in order to access that author site. And I try to post regularly on that as well. I'm on Twitter at RC_Sater. I'm still kind of learning how to do that, and so I'm on there from time to time, perhaps not as much as I should be, but I'm kind of growing into that. So, but the web page and the Facebook page probably are the best ways.
Okay, great. We'll link up to those in our show notes, as well as give people the buy link so they can pick up Rank if they have not done so yet.
Thank you. If I can let your readers know, it's available through Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, other online booksellers. If you buy it through Bold Strokes Books, the publisher, for the price of the paperback, you get the e-book free.
Oh, good.
Through Bold Strokes Books. So you get 2 for the price of the paperback. If you order them through Amazon or Barnes & Noble or other sites, it's a separate price for each. So if you're looking and you might want one of each, then you can go through the publisher. And there's a link to the publisher. You can search Bold Strokes Books, or you can get a link from my website to the publisher's page.
And we'll link people to that as well. We always link to Amazon, but in this case, for that deal, we'll also link up to Bold Strokes Books for that.
Great, thank you.
Richard, thanks so much for being with us and talking about this book.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Jeff.
Want to be among the first to know what's coming up on the Big Gay Fiction Podcast? Join the Big Gay Fiction Podcast monthly newsletter. As a subscriber, you'll get our exclusive coloring pages that you can download and color. You can even send us your artistic creations and we'll display them in our online gallery. Go to biggayfictionpodcast.com and sign up on the homepage.
So I think that'll do it for this week's show.
Yes, before we go, I hope everyone out there is staying warm and bundled up.
Or dry, depending on where you are.
Well, yeah, our neck of the woods is kind of wet and soggy. Everywhere else, it's kind of really freezing. And
cold and snowy. And
everyone is digging out. So I hope you are well, and maybe you've gotten some good, reading time in front of the fire.
It's certainly a good time to curl up with the cocoa and the fire and such.
Yeah.
So coming up next week on episode 67, we've got Danny from Love Bites here. She's going to offer up some book recommendations that are made up of her best of 2016.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
So, everyone, keep warm, keep reading, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
For detailed show notes and the complete episode backlist, go to biggayfictionpodcast.com. New episodes are available every Monday on all major podcast distributors and YouTube. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.